I'm a 52-year-old HVAC contractor from outside Columbus, Ohio. I own a small business, 6 employees, 2 trucks, nothing glamorous. I wake up at 5:30 most mornings, drink black coffee standing at the kitchen counter, and I'm usually on a job site before 7. That's been my life for about 20 years. My name is Ray, and I needed to tell you what happened to my marriage, not because I want sympathy, not because I'm angry anymore. I passed through angry about 14 months ago and came out the other side of it. I'm telling this because I think a lot of men are standing in their kitchens right now, feeling something they can't name yet, and maybe this helps them name it faster than I did. Carol and I met when we were both 26. She was working the front desk at an insurance office. I was there because my first truck got rear-ended and I needed paperwork notarized. She laughed at something I said. I honestly can't remember what, and I asked her to dinner before I made it back to the parking lot. We got married 2 years later in her parents' backyard. 40 people. A cake her aunt made. I wore a rented suit that was a size too big in the shoulders. We have 2 kids. Brendan, who's now 21 and finishing his junior year at Ohio State, and Maya, who's 17 and about to be a senior in high school. Maya still lives with us, with me now, I should say. That took some adjusting, the grammar of it. For the first 15 years, we were good. Not movie good, real good. The kind of marriage that isn't exciting to talk about because it's mostly just 2 people building something together without making a big production of it. We argued about money sometimes. We went through a rough patch after Carol's mother died. There were years where we felt more like business partners than romantic partners. But that felt normal to me. That felt like what long marriages actually were. She went back to work full-time about 6 years ago, once Maya was settled in middle school. Got a job as an office manager at a regional pharmaceutical distribution company. It was a good job. Better pay than she'd had before. She was proud of it, and I was proud of her. I should have been paying more attention to what that job was giving her that I wasn't. It was a Tuesday in February. 14 months ago, Carol had just left for work. I was standing at the kitchen window with my coffee, watching her back out of the driveway. Just a habit I have, watching the car go, don't ask me why. When my eyes drifted to her phone on the counter, she'd forgotten it. She never forgot her phone. In 23 years, I'd watched her go back into restaurants, parking garages, grocery stores for that phone. It was practically an extension of her hand. I almost grabbed it to run it out to her, but she was already at the end of the street. I set it down and went back to my coffee. About 2 minutes later, it lit up on the counter. I wasn't trying to read it. The screen just caught my eye the way screens do. Miss you already. Yesterday was exactly what I needed. No name. Just a number I didn't recognize. I stood there. The refrigerator was humming. The coffee maker made its last few clicks. Upstairs I could hear the shower running. Maya getting ready for school. I picked up the phone. I looked at the message again. Miss you already. Yesterday was exactly what I needed. Yesterday was a Monday. Carol had told me Sunday night she had an all-day off-site meeting Monday, back-to-back sessions. Probably wouldn't be home until 7. She got home at 7:15. She'd seemed tired. Kissed me on the cheek, asked if there was anything for dinner. Normal. I put the phone back down on the counter exactly where it had been. I finished my coffee. I drove to a job site in Westerville and spent the day running conduit in a commercial building while my brain tried to find an explanation that made sense. Here's what I told myself over the next 2 weeks. It was a coworker, a girlfriend. Some context I didn't have. Carol had female friends from the office I'd never met. Maybe she'd helped someone through something personal. Maybe it was code for something I wasn't understanding. Yesterday was exactly what I needed. I told myself people say things like that all the time. Spa days, wine nights, long lunches. Women say that to each other, but I'm not stupid. I've been reading people my whole working life. You spend enough years crawling into strangers' attics and basements. You get good at reading a room. You learn to notice what doesn't fit, and something didn't fit. Carol had been different since late fall. Not dramatically, not in a way I could have pointed to on a Tuesday and said, there, that's it. More like a photograph that's slightly out of focus. Still recognizable, but not quite sharp. She'd started caring more about what she wore to work, not in a way that alarmed me, just in a way I noticed in retrospect. New blouses, a pair of heels she bought and wore before I'd even seen them still in the box. She'd started leaving her phone face down on tables. She'd started going to bed later, saying she was catching up on emails, and when I'd fall asleep before her, I'd sometimes wake at 2 in the morning and the bed would still be empty. I'd asked once gently. She said she had a lot going on at work. Quarterly reports, a difficult audit. I believed her because I wanted to believe her. That's the thing nobody tells you about denial. It's not stupidity. It's a decision your brain makes to protect you from something it knows will change everything. I'm not proud of what I did next, or maybe I am. I haven't decided. 3 weeks after the text, I did something I'd never done in 23 years of marriage. I went through my wife's email. Not her phone. She'd gotten better about keeping that with her. But her personal laptop, which she left open on the kitchen table some mornings. She'd been logged into her email since we shared a Netflix password, and I'd helped her set up the family account. She'd never changed the saved password. I'm an HVAC guy. I'm not sophisticated, but I'm patient and I'm thorough. You have to be in my business or you misdiagnose something and make it worse. His name was Greg Harmon, Regional Vice President of Operations for her company. Based out of the Cincinnati office but traveled to Columbus twice a month for meetings. I found 4 months of emails, not explicit, they were careful, but the language was unmistakable once you had context, counting down the days. References to a specific hotel on Broad Street. An email from him, mid-December, that said, "You make the Columbus trips worth making." An email from her that said, "I keep thinking about what you said, about what we could be, what we could be." I read that line 6 times. I was sitting at my own kitchen table at 6 in the morning with my coffee going cold. The heater was running. The dog was asleep on the floor next to my feet. Upstairs, Maya was still asleep, what we could be. I closed the laptop. I went to work. I installed a residential heat pump in Gahana, and I didn't say a word to my guys about anything. My hands kept doing their job while the rest of me was somewhere far away. That night, I looked up Greg Harmon on LinkedIn, 54 years old, MBA from Michigan, broad smile in his headshot, the kind of photo where the suit costs more than my truck payment. He had a wife, 2 kids in high school, a golden retriever in his profile photo, sitting next to him at what looked like a lake house. I stared at his face for a long time. He didn't look like a monster. He looked like a man who was very comfortable. Over the next 6 weeks, I documented everything quietly. I'm not going to pretend I was cool-headed about it. There were nights I sat in my truck in the garage at midnight and just stared at the windshield. There were mornings I watched Carol make lunches for Maya and felt something so profoundly sad I can't describe it to you. It wasn't rage, exactly. It was grief wearing rage's clothes. But I kept going. I found the hotel charges on our joint credit card, 3 of them over 4 months, billed as Columbus Marriott Easton, all on Mondays, the same hotel, the same day of the week, the all-day off-site meetings. I made copies of everything, printed emails, credit card statements with dates highlighted. I kept it in a manila folder in the locked toolbox in the back of my work truck. I hired a private investigator for 3 weeks. I want to be honest about that. I wasn't willing to confront her on a feeling. I needed to know what I was actually dealing with before I made any decision that would affect my daughter's life. The PI confirmed a meeting at the hotel in early March. Gave me time-stamped photos I haven't looked at a second time. I looked at them once. Once was enough. I paid the PI in cash and thanked him and drove to a park near my office and sat in the parking lot for about an hour, watching some kids kick a soccer ball around and thought about what 23 years actually meant, whether they meant anything anymore. Whether the memory of something good could survive the knowledge of how it ended. Here's the part I wasn't prepared for. About a month into my investigation, I was looking at old family photos on my phone. I don't know why. My brain does strange things when it's under stress, and I stopped on a photo of Maya at about age 7. She was squinting into the sun, smiling. Her hair was this impossible tangle, and I thought with a cold clarity that I still feel ashamed of. When did this start? The emails I'd found went back 4 months. But emails aren't the beginning of something. They're the middle. People don't start emailing that way in week 1. I sat with that question for 3 days before I did anything about it. Maya is 17 years old. She has my mother's laugh. She has my father's habit of chewing on the end of pens. She has been the most constant source of joy in my life for 17 years. I ordered a DNA test online, one of the at-home ones. I used a cheek swab for her. She thought it was a family ancestry project I'd seen advertised. I told her I was curious about our heritage. She rolled her eyes and said, "Sure, whatever, Dad." I want to tell you I was calm waiting for those results. I wasn't. For 11 days I was a man walking around inside a life that might not be his. Going to work, eating dinner, watching my daughter do homework at the kitchen table, wondering if the last 17 years had been built on something that wasn't real. The results came back on a Thursday morning to my email, "Maya is my daughter." I sat in my truck and cried in a way I hadn't cried since my father died. Not from sadness. From something that doesn't have a clean name, relief and grief at the same time. She was mine. She had always been mine. But the fact that I'd had to ask the question at all felt like something that could never fully heal. I called my son the next week. He was in his apartment near campus. I drove up and took him to lunch, just the 2 of us. I told him everything. He's 21, not a kid. He sat across the booth from me with his food untouched and didn't say anything for a long time. "How long have you known?" he finally asked. "About 6 weeks. And you're sure?" "I'm sure." He looked out the window. His jaw worked. He has my build, broadened through the shoulders, big hands. He looked older than 21 sitting there. "What are you going to do?" "I'm working on it," I said. "I need you to not say anything to your mother yet, or Maya, not until I'm ready." He nodded. He reached across the table and put his hand on my arm for a moment. Neither of us said anything. We ate our lunch. We talked about his classes. We hugged in the parking lot longer than we usually do. He called me when he got back to his apartment just to make sure I was okay. That's the kid we raised. Greg Harmon's company held their annual regional appreciation dinner every year in late April, a hotel ballroom downtown, spouses encouraged to attend. Carol had gone the last 4 years. She'd mentioned it in early March that she'd already RSVP'd. I asked if I could come this year. She seemed, I noticed it, a half-second hesitation, caught off guard. "Of course," she said, "I'll add you." I didn't tell her what I knew. I'm not going to pretend I had some elaborate plan. I didn't. But I'd talked to a lawyer 3 weeks earlier, a family attorney, an older woman named Patricia who had a small practice near my office, and she'd helped me understand my options. I'd also had a very quiet conversation with one of Carol's coworkers, a woman named Diane, who'd worked with Carol for 5 years and who I'd always liked. Diane had figured something out months before I had. She confirmed what I already knew and confirmed Greg's wife did not know. Greg Harmon's wife's name was Susan. She was at the dinner. I want to be clear about what I did and didn't do. I'm not proud of making a scene. I don't think I did. What I did was survive the cocktail hour standing next to my wife while she talked to her coworkers, watching her navigate being in a room with both me and him, watching her smile go slightly fixed every time he was in her peripheral vision. Greg Harmon came over at some point during dinner to introduce himself to me. Confident handshake, good teeth. Ray, right? I've heard a lot about you. Carol talks about your business all the time. I shook his hand. She's mentioned you too, I said. He smiled, said something forgettable and moved on. Before dessert was served, I asked to be excused and walked to the table where Susan Harmon was sitting with some of the other spouses. She was a nice woman, quiet, polite. We talked about nothing for a few minutes, where we were from, our kids, then I said quietly, I think there's something you need to know. I'm not going to make a scene, but I want you to have what I have before we all go home tonight. I slid a folded piece of paper across the table to her. It had the PI's name and my phone number. I'm sorry, I genuinely am. She looked at the paper. She looked at me. I went back to my table. I'm not going to dramatize what happened over the next 40 minutes. Susan Harmon is not a dramatic woman. There was no screaming, no dishes, no moment of public theater. What happened was, she stood up, spoke quietly to her husband, and they left the dinner early. Whatever conversation they had in that hotel lobby or that car ride home, I wasn't part of it and didn't need to be. Carol watched them leave. She didn't look at me for the rest of the evening. On the drive home, she stared out the passenger window and I drove in silence. The city lights passed. The radio was off. How long have you known? She asked. Long enough, I said. She started to say something. Stopped. Started again. Ray, not tonight, I said. Not in the car. Not now. We drove the rest of the way home in silence. We talked 3 days later. Carol had asked me twice, and both times I'd said I needed more time, which I did. There's no point having the conversation you've been dreading when you're still in the part where rage is making all your decisions. We sat at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning after Maya left for work. She had a weekend shift at the coffee shop. The dog was outside. The coffee was getting cold between us. Carol told me it had been going on for about 8 months, that it had started as a friendship, that she hadn't meant for it to become what it became. I've read enough of these stories to know that's what people say. It doesn't make it less true. It's just not as comforting as people think it is. She told me she was sorry. She said it several times. She meant it. I believe that. Meaning it doesn't fix anything, but I believe she meant it. I asked her if she loved him. She looked at the table. I thought I might, she said. I don't know. I think I was in love with how I felt around him. That's different, I think. It doesn't really matter, I said, does it? She looked at me and her eyes filled. I'm so sorry, Ray. I know, I said. We talked for 2 hours, not angrily, mostly. There were moments where my voice went tight and I had to stop talking for a minute. There were moments where she cried. Neither of us yelled. We're not yellers. We're people who go quiet when we're in pain. At some point, I told her about the DNA test. She went completely still. You did a yes. She put her hand over her mouth. Her face did something complicated that I won't try to describe. Maya is mine, I said. I needed to know. Of course she's yours, Carol whispered. Ray, of course she is. I know that now. We sat with that for a while. What do you want? She finally asked. What do you want to happen? I want the last 8 months back, I said. But I can't have that. What I wanted and said to separate, to tell the kids together, to keep things civil for Maya's last year at home, to not destroy 23 years more than it had to be destroyed. She agreed to all of it. The next 2 months were the strangest of my life. We were still living in the same house, still having dinner sometimes, still talking about normal things. Maya's schedule, the dog's vet appointment, whether the back gutter needed to be replaced before rain season. We were two people disassembling a life while trying to keep it intact for a 17-year-old who was about to face her senior year. We told the kids together on a Sunday afternoon. Brendan drove down from Columbus. We sat in the living room, the same room where we'd had 100 Christmases and birthday parties and movie nights, and Carol and I told them that we were separating, that we both loved them completely, that this was between us and not about them. Maya went very quiet. She's like me that way. Brendan held it together in that careful way he does, and then when we stepped outside to give the kids a minute, he walked to the end of the driveway and stood there with his hands in his pockets and his shoulders doing what shoulders do when someone is trying not to cry. I walked out and stood next to him. You okay? I said. No, he said. Me neither. We stood there together in the driveway for a while. The neighbor's kids were riding bikes somewhere down the street. An ordinary Sunday afternoon, for what it's worth. He and Susan Harmon separated 3 weeks after the company dinner. I heard this from Diane, not from Carol. He left the regional VP position about 2 months after that, resigned officially, though Diane suggested the resignation was encouraged. His golden retriever lake house LinkedIn life is presumably rearranging itself somewhere. I don't feel satisfaction about that, exactly. I feel a kind of flat acknowledgement. He made choices. Choices have weight. I'm writing this from my house. My house now, technically. Carol moved into an apartment about 8 months ago, a nice one, about 4 miles away. The mortgage is manageable on my income. The dog stayed with me. Maya is 7 months into her senior year. She's okay. She's applied to 4 colleges. She comes home every day and does her homework at the kitchen table, and sometimes we make dinner together. And sometimes she rolls her eyes at me for something I've said and it feels almost normal. Almost. Brendan calls every Sunday. He's thoughtful and consistent in a way that makes me feel like maybe Carol and I did something right after all. Carol and I talk about the kids, mostly. We're careful with each other. There's sadness in it. But there's also something that might eventually become friendship again. In some very quiet version. I don't know. It's too early to say I've been working more. Took on 2 new commercial contracts that keep my guys busy. I joined a recreational basketball league at the Y, which sounds like a midlife cliche and probably is. A woman I know from one of my clients, she runs an accounting firm, her name is Lena, asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. We've had coffee twice, nothing serious. I'm not ready for serious, but I'm starting to understand that ready isn't something that announces itself. It's more like a window cracking open. I'm not going to tell you that everything happens for a reason. I don't believe that. Some things just happen. What I'll tell you is this: I spent a lot of time in those first months asking what I did wrong, whether I'd been inattentive, whether I'd stopped making her feel something she needed to feel, whether I was too ordinary, too routine, too much the same reliable guy year after year. I've mostly stopped asking that. Not because the answer doesn't matter, but because I've realized the answer doesn't actually tell you what you need to know. People make choices. My wife made choices. I made the choice to handle it the way I handled it. Quietly, deliberately, with as much dignity as I could keep hold of. I still wake up some mornings and reach to the other side of the bed before I remember. I still hear her voice sometimes when Maya laughs a certain way. I still think about the backyard wedding, the rented suit with the shoulders too wide, the way she looked at me like I was the best thing that was going to happen to her. Maybe I was, for a while. And then life kept moving, and we didn't keep moving the same direction, and somebody noticed the distance before I did. I don't hate her. That surprised me, honestly. I thought I would. But hate is expensive, and I've got a business to run and a daughter to finish raising and a dog who expects to be walked regardless of how I feel about the state of my marriage. There's something on the other side of the worst thing that ever happened to you. I'm still figuring out what mine is. But I wake up at 5:30. I drink my coffee standing at the kitchen counter. I watch the morning come in through the window, and I'm still here. Ray,